Just want to give a little follow up regarding the China situation, because really I think this is a very, very pressing issue. Um, just a thanks to the very quick responses by two of my subscribers, Toxic Holy Grenade and David Holroyd. And David, I hope you don't mind me repeating this because you've put it in the comments. You've actually said that you're going to resign your membership of the Labour Party over this. So obviously it's an issue that's provoked strong feelings. I totally understand that and I commend you in doing so. Um, I'm just going to talk a bit about Prime Minister's questions from this Wednesday because this was the overriding issue. Now, just a quick thing: the Deputy Liberal Democrat leader, Daisy Cooper. I know she's now in her name's going around social media because she confronted the fact that Elon Musk is funding Tommy Robinson, the Tommy Robinson case. I may make a video specifically on that one as well. Frankly, I think Daisy Cooper is right to raise the issue of a foreign billionaire getting involved in British politics in that way, or rather the British justice system. It is a threat to our democracy, and for all the Tommy Robinson fanboys and fangirls out there, it's not particularly patriotic to have a foreign billionaire propping you up. I mean, that's not exactly. Also, it's not particularly patriotic to have your merchandise made in Bangladesh. But of course, Robinson fanboys and fangirls aren't very objective thinking. It's just a tunnel vision thing. Anyway, inevitably, these China questions came up. I just want to speak briefly about the responses by the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition. And I should say Daisy Cooper also raised the point of Hong Kongers and the lack of confidence it will send out to them with everything that's happening, and also the government's tough relying on immigration. So I give Daisy Cooper credit for raising those issues. And you know, she wasn't beating around the bush regarding naming China. So have other parties. Here's the thing with Labour and this whole scandal. Even if they are really telling the truth that they had no part in the collapse of this trial, that it's playing politics to accuse them of that, and that the accusations are unfair, even if that's all true. And in her response, I should say, Kimmy Badenoch said that these men came to trial under the Tory watch and the trial collapsed under Labour's watch. Whatever the precise timeline of events, quite frankly, the optics are very important here. In this environment with serious national security questions, Keir Starmer still thinks it's appropriate to be planning a visit to China next year. With everything that's been said, with everything that is being potentially jeopardised around our national security, he still thinks it's okay to visit China next year. His advisors should really be considering this very carefully and saying at least put it off, or at least, well, actually he should cancel it. In this environment, I don't see how he can go to China like it's just another country and talk to Xi Jinping as if he's a partner that respects his country. He doesn't. Xi Jinping and his thug regime see Britain as weak. I am not against the idea of diplomacy, but I think when it comes to a powerful adversary, and it's in the context of a time when there are serious national security questions, going to China at this time is just, it's even more naive than David Cameron's golden era overtures in 2015, because the situation's even worse in 2015. The espionage level has risen. I was looking at the interview, or the speech rather, the annual speech given by the head of MI5, Ken McCallum, on this issue, and he was making it clear that national security threats come not only from extremism such as the far right and Islamism, but also from state threats. He didn't name China explicitly, but that's clearly what that is referring to. I don't think this issue is going to go away anytime soon. And I think that so far, like so many things, the Prime Minister's responses to it just come across as evasive and weak. Now, Starmer was a lawyer. Starmer was the head of the CPS, and he can talk about how he knows the law better than Kimmy Badenoch and all the rest of it. Now, frankly, it doesn't matter because the optics are there. Starmer looks weak on China. What he needs to do, I think, is really publicly rebuke Beijing. It's not good enough to just be defensive and say, oh, all the other parties' claims about the government are false, or this is the timeline and all the rest of it, if the perception is that Labour is weak on China. So far, they've done nothing to dissuade people of that reputation. Now, I don't think that the average member of the public right now is too bothered about this, but those of us who follow geopolitics absolutely should be. I'm no xenophobe, and I have to keep emphasising this point. I have nothing against Chinese citizens. You know, I buy products from my local Chinese store. I have worked as an English tutor. My students have been Chinese. I have had close relations with the Chinese community here. But I have never ever sold my soul. When I was in China, when I was working in China, I never once sold my soul. I remember one of my students asked me what I thought of the Chinese Communist Party, and I had a choice. I could have told him bluntly what I thought and therefore been in serious trouble, which would have been a bit reckless, and it wouldn't have been a smart move to make. I could have lied and said, oh, I think it's wonderful. You know, some English teachers do this. They go to China and just kind of flatter their hosts because they think that's the way to play it safe. I didn't do that. What I said to the student was, look, I'm sorry, I just can't talk about this issue. Because they literally tell you that. When you're teaching there, they say no politics, no religion, and when it comes to relationships, you have to talk about, you know, unless you're married to someone, they dissuade you from talking about relationships. So I feel I stood by my conviction without selling out. I was never going to, you know, some foreign teachers do this thing where they will say, oh, well, the Chinese Communist Party has lifted millions of people out of poverty. And they basically just repeat the propaganda of the CCP. I refuse to do that. There was another time I was with a colleague and she started praising Chairman Mao. Again, I could have just agreed with her and just went along with it. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't get into a big confrontation and say, wait a second, what about the millions of people he killed? Why? Because I'm in a remote part of China in her husband's car, in a remote area. It just wouldn't be, you know, why am I going to create a situation to put myself in, you know, an awkward sort of exchange like that? It wouldn't make sense. So I just kept my mouth shut. I just kind of nodded my head. But what I'm proud to say I never ever done was sold my soul, and I never would. And I did get into confrontations with Chinese acquaintances about this, including actually in Shanghai. I spoke back to a member of the Chinese Communist Party in Shanghai. So I can rest well knowing my own conviction that I've stood up for my thoughts against the CCP. But, and you know, I reiterate what I said. It isn't easy to stand up to a superpower. It does take guts. There was one point in the exchange where James Cleverly was brought up as the former Foreign Secretary and his Mansion House speech. I recall watching that. Now, at the end of the session, he wanted to set the record straight, as he said he'd been misquoted. The truth of the matter is the Tories have not got a squeaky clean record on this either. A lot of the Tory record was flip-flopping. You know, take Boris Johnson, for instance. Tough on China one day, soft the next. You know, he flip-flopped around the issue of 5G technology coming from China. So the truth is no British government in recent years has a really strong record in this. Dominic Raab, as Foreign Secretary, did recall the Chinese ambassador, and I give him credit for that, over the Hong Kong situation. And I believe it was the Johnson government that offered a settlement for Hong Kong students and nationals, but no British government has been consistently tough on China. And arguably our worst Prime Minister ever, Liz Truss, is ironically the one Prime Minister who has been consistently hardline with China. It's the one, probably the only thing she got right. But I just find it astonishing that at this time, Coming out of the pandemic, when 250,000 British citizens died, coming out of the fact that Labour claimed that they would designate the repression of the Uyghur people to be a genocide. They've backtracked on that. Coming out of the fact that we know Chinese espionage is a very serious threat in this country. The security services have repeatedly warned of this. Coming amidst the fact that British MPs have been targeted by Beijing. All of these things. And I haven't even included individual incidents such as Kong Lin Lim. She was a reporter, so-called reporter, with Chinese mouthpiece CGTN, and she physically assaulted a young Hong Kong activist in Birmingham. She also verbally lambasted Benedict Rogers, who's a human rights activist and member of the Conservative Party. That is the sort of thing. I think in that incident, she should have had her visa stripped and been expelled from the country. We've had numerous, the current spy case regarding the two Christophers isn't the only one. There was a case of the Birmingham solicitor who'd been in this country for years, and she was accused of being a Beijing spy. She was a Chinese national, Christine Lee, I believe was her name. So there's a long trajectory here of China presenting a threat to this country. And what happens when the embassy thing is prolonged? Beijing sends out threats. That's the sort of regime we're dealing with. When our actual friend Australia raised issues about, raised the prospect of an independent inquiry into COVID, and be clear here that Canberra wasn't accusing Beijing over COVID, they were simply calling for an independent inquiry. Beijing lashed out and threatened to destroy the Australian wine industry. They're bullies, and I just think it is appalling that Starmer is planning to go to China next year. As that comes up, I really hope that Badenoch, or her successor if she's replaced, and the other party leaders really, really push Labour on this. If Farage has any sense, his party's coming under scrutiny for Russia ties, he should throw it back. I don't trust reform on Russia, but politically speaking, if I was Farage's advisors, I would be saying, push this hard, push this security issue on China hard. This is not going to go away. Mark my words, this scandal is not going to go away. It may even get bigger. Because it's on such a potentially big scale that I don't think this should just be swept under the carpet as, this is the issue of the week. This is a major issue, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. But when are British governments, successive British governments, going to realise that we cannot approach Beijing with weakness? We cannot approach them by this indication that we'll just give them what they want. We need to vocally, publicly condemn their aggression and stop pandering to them. I'm not saying cut off all links. That would be naive. It wouldn't be really realistic to just say we can't have any relations with the world's second biggest economy, but what we shouldn't be doing is giving Beijing what it wants. And, for example, approving of the mega embassy would be doing just that. Let them have a tantrum. Let them then prolong work on the British embassy in Beijing. It's a price we'll have to pay. That's a better price than sacrificing trade over national security. I don't think any trade is worth the price of national security, quite frankly. And powerful as China is, there's many other growing economies in the world. Brazil, Mexico, Indonesia, indeed India. We don't need to overly rely on China alone. We could be looking at other emerging economies. And yes, they may not have perfect human rights records, but they don't pose the sort of threat that China does. So this is something that is not going to go away. I'm going to say it, I think Labour's soft on China. They've done nothing to prove otherwise. And Keir Starmer seems personally reluctant to condemn China. Why? He can say all these, polished answers about taking national security seriously and all the rest of it. If he cannot bring himself to publicly, either in the Commons or elsewhere, in a statement outside Number 10, on social media, wherever the case may be, if he cannot bring himself to publicly condemn Chinese interference in this country, by name, not just, we condemn interference by outside actors. He needs to publicly say, I condemn China for interfering in this country. Let the Chinese deny it. Let them have a tantrum. But the evidence is clear. Starmer needs to start listening to the security services.